Okay, so last month we learned about the landmark water tower and its construction, its changing uses, and its local significance. And tonight we're going to focus on that proud acclamation emblazoned on the water tower that's there for all to see, that Placentia is an all-America city. From the very early days of this community, when Sarah Jane McFadden, seen here at the Ostrich Farm in Fullerton, dubbed it a pleasant place, Placentia residents have taken pride in being here. Later, residents adopted a motto directly from Shakespeare that said, "The people are the city." It's in fact the people of Placentia who collaborated and conspired to earn this award of the All-America City. So where did the All-America City Award originate? When did we receive it? And what was recognized and by whom? The All-America City Award is presented by the National Civic League. It's an American nonprofit organization that advocates for transparency, effectiveness, and openness in local government. It was created as the National Municipal League in 1894 at the National Conference for Good City Government in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Its founders include Theodore Roosevelt, Frederick Law Olmsted, and Louis Brandeis, and other leading municipal reformers of the late 19th century. The League has been instrumental in efforts to make local governments more open, and it also promotes professional management of local government through publication of model charters for both city and county governments. It was created in 1949, the All-America City Award. It was once called the Nobel Prize for the Constructive Citizenship. It's been awarded to more than 500 communities across the country. The award is open to the full diversity of American communities, from major cities and regions to towns, villages, counties, neighborhoods, and tribes. During the application process, communities reflect on their strengths, weaknesses, challenges, and the progress they have made. All-America cities are national models, inspiring others who face similar critical challenges. Each year, hundreds of leaders, volunteers, and young people from the finalist communities travel to Denver, Colorado to present a story of their work and their community to a jury of national experts. The awards conference includes workshops on promising practices where everyone can learn new approaches to community collaboration. The focus of the award changes annually. Last year, in 2016, the All-America City Award focused on innovative community efforts to ensure that all children are healthy and supported in school and in life. But in 1971, when Placentia received the award, the focus was community betterment through citizen action. Applicant cities were asked to emphasize first the most basic problems and concerns of their cities, the extent and nature of citizen participation, the degree of success attained, and they were to stress the activity just since July of 1970. So as we all know, the early economy of this area depended almost exclusively on the citrus industry. In fact, with its 5 packing houses, Placentia was the very heart of the packing and shipping for the entire area through the early 1960s. 3 Hispanic settlements known as Colonias or colonies, Atwood, La Jolla, and Placentia, provided most of the citrus laborers for Placentia growers. Conditions in these communities were always challenging. After being ravaged by the flood of 1938, Atwood and La Jolla struggled to achieve fundamental services such as sewers, lighting, and paved streets. The basic problems of the Mexican-American population mounted as new residents attracted by the aerospace industry increased by over 16,000 after 1960. So this just gives the dates up till the time of the application. So you can see how it was almost 4 times improved, 4 times increased from 1960 to 1970. It's a big, so the application states that a small city with a heretofore large population of Mexican-American ancestry was catapulted from an agricultural center to a community predominantly dependent upon the aerospace industry. The three main projects actively stressed since July of 1970, which Placentia citizens shared a mutual determination to conquer, were first, to assist the residents of the Atwood colony to realize their goals to upgrade living standards by annexation to the city and provide upgrading of the blighted freeway dividing the La Jolla colony. Secondly, to utilize the latent talents of its teenage population. And finally, to establish goals and provide recreational opportunities for the entire city. The local indigenous leader in Atwood seemed to be a young woman named Esther Gonzalez. She was well known in her community because of her willingness to help her neighbors with the daily tasks of everyday life, such as driving to doctor's appointments, buying groceries, handling financial affairs, and supporting educational opportunities, and working toward a dignified and safe environment. Esther was a lifelong resident of Atwood and who wanted to enhance the community in which she grew up so that her children would come to value and love the area as well. In an interview found in the archive at Cal State Fullerton's DeGraff Center for Oral and Public History, Esther noted that her mother had been one of the original settlers of Atwood, and she remembered, quote, "When I was young, we cooked with wood. We didn't have inside plumbing. I think it was after the flood when we had inside sinks, and very few people had inside toilets," end quote. And in school, Esther felt the effect of segregation. There was a lot of discrimination in the schools. The American kids would go to one school and we would go to another school. The kids were separated until you got to 10th grade, and then you had to mix the high school with the other Anglos. So this is why so many kids dropped out. In 10th grade, we had 2 periods of home economics because they figured that all we were going to do was to get out of high school and get married. So you can imagine we didn't have any typing or no office training at all, end quote. So Esther ignored her mother's encouragement to stay in school and had only reached the 10th grade before she herself had married and had 4 children. She divorced her alcoholic husband and struggled to raise the youngsters alone. She was very conscious of the fact that her children had only one parent at home, so she was determined to stay available to them as much as possible and watch over their education. She lived in her mother's home and helped care for older relatives while keeping an eye on her own offspring. For this, she received $10 a week from her family. Well, this was obviously not enough income to feed and clothe her children, so Esther accepted help from the welfare department for a short time and was encouraged to stay home and nurture her children. Eventually, however, she did find work in the agricultural economy of the region. She said, quote, "I had made up my mind that I was going to go to work, and I couldn't find anything, so I went to work in the fields. And I was very lucky because of my English and Spanish. They put me kind of second to the foreman, you know, tallied the strawberry boxes and all that and translated to the workers," end quote. Because of this opportunity, Esther was always encouraged her own children and their peers to master both languages of the English and Spanish. In 1965, thanks to the War on Poverty initiated by Lyndon Johnson in his State of the Union address a year earlier, efforts were made to improve the educational opportunities in Atwood. The League of United Latin American Citizens, or LULAC, banded with 2 faculty members from California State University Fullerton to apply for federal grants and create a Head Start program in Atwood. However, this program did not meet the intended goals, but it did set a good precedent for the vital importance of English classes that carried over time. About 2 years later, in 1967, the Community Action Council, or CAC, came on the scene after having been sanctioned by both the County of Orange and the Office of Economic Opportunity in San Francisco, which was an agency of the War on Poverty. The council included representatives from the Mexican American and Black communities, from organizations such as the League of Women Voters and the Salvation Army, and from local churches and philanthropic groups like the Rotary and the JCs. The tool of the Community Action Council was neighborhood community centers that would serve as the liaison between the poor and the governmental bureaucracy. 9 centers were established in Orange County, with Atwood Center being the first. The role of the Community Action Council was to get people together, identify issues of need, and organize action to bring about change and improvement. Generally, the first request handled by these centers was for health and tutorial programs, primarily prenatal and well baby care and the opportunity to learn English. Well, since the Head Start program was already in place, when the council's representative, Mr. Ray Villa, met with some 15 women in the kitchen of Esther Gonzalez's home, he was confronted with a rather unusual request for the use of CAC resources. These women wanted to feel safer in their home community, and they asked that street lighting be installed. As I said, Atwood had no lights, storm drains, sewers, sidewalks, and very few paved roads. So Villa helped a man named Fidel Gonzalez to do some research, and they discovered that Atwood had been included in a lighting district that was part of Placentia. Fidel went to the Orange County Board of Supervisors and found that taxes had been accumulating, but no one had requested them. So he put in a petition, and lights were installed on 2 streets in Atwood within 2 months. Besides successfully guiding the community through the maze of government offices to get to street lights, Ray Villa also obtained funds to rent an old cafe and move the tutorial sessions supported by LULAC indoors. This became the new community center. An aide from the CAC ran the facility in Atwood on a very minimal basis, trying to establish a calendar of regular activities, but lacking the manpower to completely staff them. Esther Gonzalez was working in the fields at the time, but when the season was over, she went looking for more employment. She was hesitant about taking on the role of program coordinator at the center, but her neighbors insisted that she was the perfect person to do so. Only after Esther was convinced by her neighbors that she was indeed the right person to serve as the center's director did things really take off. Esther worked under the direction of the CAC for about 2 years, and she struggled with their somewhat unreasonable demands. She was not only to keep the center open all day during regular hours without funded staff positions, but she was also to canvass the community, making house calls to increase participation. She started English classes and a preschool program. She made personal house calls to let people know about the programs. She gave community talks to gather donations and volunteers, and she attended regular staff meetings held at the main council office. As she did this to the best of her ability, even then she dreamed of a dedicated community center that would replace the program still housed in the former cafe. To that end, the volunteers and program participants held dances regularly and accumulated funds for a deposit on property. The women who were active in the programs had a very interesting fundraiser. They managed to make a cookbook, and the cookbook was the recipes that were used by the people when they came to a program. There would be a potluck dinner sometimes. So these recipes then were accumulated into the cookbook. The cookbook was printed, someone contributed the printing, and then they were individually hand decorated and sold for $3. Now, I've tried to collect and find one of those, and then I put it out on the Placentia Buzz, and I had a little bit of a nibble, but then somehow the connection didn't go through, and so I was able to respond to the person who mentioned they might be able to find one. But for only $3 a piece, these women sold enough to earn $600. So there's got to be some out there, right? So if anybody hears about a cookbook that was used to raise funds to begin a community building in Atwood, please let me know, and it would be great if we could have one in the history room. Okay, the idea of community collaboration grew along with the community center's programs. Atwood's residents were separated from their commercial area along Orangethorpe Avenue by the railroad tracks, and to make this difficult situation worse, the widening of Orangethorpe Avenue near the post office reduced the commercial area still more. The residents requested help from the county to create a small park for the area, but responses to these requests were slow in coming, and especially after annexation to Placentia became a live possibility, the county's delays grew even worse. The citizen initiative to create change is again pointed out in the All-America City application when they say, quote, neglected by inadequate county services, dirt streets, few lights, no sewer system, no library, no recreational facilities, minimal police and fire assistance, disgusted Atwood citizens organized a steering committee to seek annexation to Placentia in order to upgrade living standards. Beginning in October of 1970, the Atwood Steering Committee involved the entire neighborhood in a goals program, annexation proceedings, and the residential and recreational planning of a renewed neighborhood. The Atwood Steering Committee encountered intense opposition from major oil companies who have holdings in the area. You can imagine the oil companies were anxious that they could still use the property. The oil companies unsuccessfully contested the annexation in the courts. Many citizens in the city voiced opposition to the annexation, asking why the city wished to annex a blighted area when there were more desirable areas that could be annexed. After achieving annexation, the Atwood Development Committee was formed. They obtained housing loans, provided coordination, pooled resources, and obtained outside advisory assistance. It's the mention of the housing loans to the project that I really get excited about. I find it quite impressive that the Atwood Steering Committee was a group of 36 local families that obtained a federal loan for construction materials. This allowed the residents to personally build their homes at 1% financing. I understand even that it lured some former Atwood residents whose parents had left the community. They would return with their own families in the hopes of owning a home in the neighborhood. Classes and guidance through the community center were provided by electricians, painters, landscapers, and other professional union members. Some teenagers even were excited to learn these crafts and offered their assistance to the new home builders. As you see here in the bottom picture that we just found in the newspapers, the women worked during the day, and then in the evening when the men came home from their jobs, they would continue working building the houses. More than 30 homes were completed under this project and included with the annexation to Placentia. So the upper pictures, these pictures show what the homes look like today. So you can see that they did a really fine job and had things stand up quite well to the rigors of time. These homes today comprise the neighborhood between Van Buren and Richfield Avenues, south of the Parque de los Niños. The steering committee also received a 50% matching federal grant for $175,000 to build a park in an effort to correct the recreational deficiencies. Furthermore, a $272,000 grant to construct sanitary sewers and provide connection for all poverty-level homes was garnered by the Atwood Steering Committee. And that was all what was in the application information. So likewise, citizens in the La Jolla Colonia came together to improve their local environment that had been torn asunder by the 57 freeway. I don't know if you're aware, but down on Orangethorpe, where the 57 freeway crosses Orangethorpe, just to the south, there were 4 streets there in the La Jolla community, and 2 of those were hacked off, and the third one abbreviated. So and according to the application, it says, when the La Jolla colony was faced with a new unlandscaped freeway which divided their neighborhood, they were not content to wait for the state's 5-year landscaping program. Therefore, 85 people organized a community group which landscaped and beautified the entire freeway overpass in 4 months. Okay, Rod Cortez Jimenez headed up this project and organized weekend work parties where volunteers devoted over 4,000 man-hours to pull weeds, remove trash, install a sprinkler system, and plant shrubs. Jimenez was a native of Chicago who had moved to Placentia as a young boy. He ran a successful construction company and had donated labor and materials to build housing for the Placentia Boys Club in 2 different locations. He served on the city's planning commission for 7 years, from 1967 to 74, during the transformation from an agricultural area to an urban setting. As the city grew and began to suffer the urban pangs of gang violence and unrest, Jimenez spearheaded a committee known as SOMBRA, S-O-M-B-R-A, which I do not know what that stands for, and it helped stabilize the barrio communities. And in 1991, he was appointed chairman of the Anti-Gang Advisory Committee. The Placita Park there, he was also, Mr. Jimenez was treasurer of the Placentia Redevelopment Association in 1970, when a need for open space and green areas in the La Jolla colony was recognized. Along with Alex Segovia, seen here, and another friend whose name is lost to history, Jimenez designed and developed Placita Park between Gonzalez and Tafola Streets. The Placentia JCs offered assistance to create another parkette in the La Jolla community between Iowa and Kansas Streets. So it was these accomplishments and changes in the two colonias that comprised the first component of our All-America City application. The second part of the application for the All-America City promoted the increased and innovative involvement of youth in the workings of the city. According to the application, both LULAC and Atwood steering committees, quote, expressed strong concern that recreational activities were too far away for Atwood and La Jolla youths to benefit from them. A sympathetic auto dealer, aware of the transportation problem, offered a vehicle to bring the youths to the community recreational facilities on the condition that the city would provide the driver. Recognizing that over half of the inhabitants are under 20 years of age, the Placita Tomorrow suggested youth representation on commissions and in community affairs. In turn, teen commissioners, realizing the latent energy of the community's youth, released the dormant talent of these young people by organizing the teen cabinet. Don't you just love the wording of this application? They just are putting their best foot forward. So the Placita Tomorrow that's mentioned here was a seminar series in which citizens studied their community and made specific recommendations as to what should be done over a 10-year period. Now, our current Director of Administrative Services, Steve Pischel, recalls having a Youth in Government Day that was held somewhat like every other year for nearly a 20-year period that started in the 1970s. And here, teens would shadow council members and city staff all day. They would discuss a timely issue relevant to the city concerns and then present their decisions at a mock city council meeting. The newly instituted youth government programs resulted in Bill Zurez becoming a first teen commissioner in the United States when he served on the Parks and Recreation Commission here in Placentia. Two young ladies, Jan Thomas and Vicki Jones, served on the Beautification and Recreation Commissions respectively. And again, reading from the application, the youth of the city were involved directly in community affairs since July of 1970. In order to elicit minority agreement between Mexican-American youths and the police, a Mexican-American teenager was selected to serve on the Oral Review Board, which recommended the new chief of police. As a result of the success of this initial teenager service, a teenager continues to serve on police review boards. Excuse me. A teenager is appointed annually to the Recreation and Parks Commission and another to the Beautification Commissions. This is still the quote from the application. In turn, these two teenage commissioners established a teen cabinet which permits wider involvement of the teenage population in city affairs. The goals achieved by the teen cabinet since July of 1970 involve 4 high schools and a community-wide cleanup and safety campaign consisting of removing trash and painting house numbers on every curb in the city. Some of you may have been around when your curb was painted by the youth in the city. I think they still are doing that program. In addition, teenagers faced with idle time during the summer have provided under direction and needed recreational activities for the past 3 summers through the Volunteen program. During 1971 summer, 35 volunteers donated in excess of 300 hours each. The active teen presence on city commissions has faded away over the years, and indeed some of the commissions on which they serve no longer exist. I don't think we have a beautification commission any longer. However, the Volunteen program, which we now call the Red Shirts, were still operating in it when my daughters were in it in the early 1990s, and it still serves the city through the Parks and Recreation Department. It would be great if we could locate some of the teens who took part in the Youth and Government Mock Council activities and add their recollections to our oral history files in the history room. So if any of you know of any of those people, please let us know. Teens also got involved in the third element of the All-America City application, that is to provide recreational opportunities for the citizenry. Esther Gonzalez reports on preparing for the recreational facility in Atwood. She says, "I wish you could have seen the kids working. They were cutting down about 15 or 18 eucalyptus trees, and you know how big they are. Those kids would go with saws and some with axes, and they'd plane and work it, you know. They really did half our job of cleaning the field. It was cleaned by the women and the boys. They raked it 3 times, and then the boys cleared it out. They hauled everything to the dump, trees, stumps, everything. And it's really something. You know, one boy remarked, 'Well, there's nothing to do. Might as well go work over there.'" So that was good. Okay, the application worded it this way. Quote, Placentia's mushrooming community faced a void of recreational facilities. A citizen committee composed of 250 key members organized to study the recreational needs for the entire city. The committee set as its primary goal a bond issue campaign to purchase sites and finance buildings of 6 neighborhood parks, a community building, a gymnasium, and a youth facility. There were 1,250 people who invested countless hours to achieve the success of this goal. Parents of the Little League players finished the snack shop and maintenance building at the Tuffrey Field. By July of 1971, the efforts of these people were realized as all facilities were completed, dedicated, and fully utilized. So here you can see the Bax building, the snack shop at Tuffrey Park, and the little plaque that they put up for the parents who helped build the plaque, or who helped build the snack bar. When the application was discussing the obstacles that had to be overcome, it says that inflation, this is what I really find interesting, the inflation raised the expense of park construction by approximately $400,000 after passage of the $980,000 bond issue. The city was faced with the alternative of either reducing the number of parks or returning to the voters for additional money. Parents and other citizens who were not willing to settle for a reduction in services examined the problem and pointed to a cost savings that could be realized if the city acted as its own general contractor and subcontracted specific projects. Thus, the parks were completed within budget limitations. I think that's very commendable. According to newspaper articles, the 6 park sites had been bought by the city in 1967 next to local schools, but they were not developed. After the bond issue passed, the parks, as well as the Bax Building in Kramer Park, the community building in Cook Park, and the gymnasium at Tuffrey Park were constructed. Again, according to a report written by Heritage Day planner Marv Reed, quote, in June of 1971, after several months of planning, the city of Placentia submitted its bid for recognition as an All-America city. Ed Powell, then city administrator, remembers the staff and a number of volunteers going over every page, every line, to be sure the information was just right. And we all know that the wording was really fantastic. The key people preparing the application were Virginia Farmer, then library board president, Jack Slota, who was assistant city administrator, Sal Zavala on the Placentia School Board, Phil Montano, who was an Atwood activist, Fred Aguirre, library board and Placentia native, Ed Powell, city administrator, and Vic Michelle, who was the committee chairperson. A copy of the application, if you're interested, is available in the history room, and you can see that. Then Reed continues in his statement. In September, Placentia was notified that we were one of the 18 finalists and we should prepare our oral presentation. The oral presentations were made to the All-America City Committee on November 10, 1971 in Atlanta, Georgia. As a finalist, a 10-minute presentation to the All-America City Committee was allowed. Bob Finnell, Placentia mayor at the time, was the main presenter. Sal Zavala discussed the Atwood portion and Jan Thomas the teen portion. Vic Michelle, Phil Montano, and Vic Jones were their respective backups. The remainder of the committee, Ellen Covey, Joe Lyons, Paul Marshall, and Betty Delaney, eagerly awaited news of the presentation back in Placentia. I selected these images from the National Civic League website, these two that are, more obviously colored. And then I learned from the newspaper clippings in a scrapbook at a city hall that Santa Fe Springs, which is celebrating their celebrations down here, it was the other city that was to receive the award the same year Placentia did. So that you can see, excuse me, the judges would have been the same judges to which we presented our own arguments from Placentia. Jimmy Carter was then the governor of Georgia, and he addressed the conference. And Marv Reed's account mentions other dignitaries at the gala. That evening at the annual banquet of the All-American City Committee, Vice President Hubert Humphrey was the guest of honor and main speaker. Almost all of the finalists at the dinner were adults, and the teen commissioners turned out to be the hit of the evening, especially with Vice President Humphrey and George Gallup, chairman of the All-America City Committee. Winners were announced in the Saturday Evening Post a few days ahead of the local declaration that took place at the Bax Building on February 28, 1972. So this is the Bax celebration, the Bax Building. Placentia was informed that we were the first city in Orange County and the 14th in California to be named an All-America City. 2 weeks later, on March 18th, a member of the Governing Council for the National Municipal League made the formal presentation of the award at a ceremony held in Bradford Stadium. Vic Knight, who was the former superintendent of the Placentia Unified School District, served as master of ceremonies for the event that kicked off a week-long celebration. The community parade included the Marine Corps Color Guard, the Kingsman Drum and Bugle Corps, and of course a queen duly selected for the occasion. As I was preparing this talk, I spotted something I never noticed before. At many locations where you enter Placentia, you're greeted by one of these signs that proclaims our All-America status. Note, it does not say All-American, but All-America. Thank you very much. This is not a claim to represent that all America, this is not a claim to represent all that America stands for. Being American means so many different things to so many people that no one city can represent it all. What this award does recognize is that in all of this fine country, there are only a few selected communities where citizens have consciously made the effort to share their success in community collaboration, in their work for the common good, and communicate to others what is possible if the American talents are put into action. I hope when you leave here tonight, you more deeply feel that Placentia really is a special place, a pleasant place. There you go.